Welcome to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. We are now in season 5, and we've changed the name and the focus of the podcast. Rev Up Your Business is the podcast for small to medium-sized business owners, entrepreneurs, and HR professionals. Each week, we share tips, strategies, and trends on how you can build success in your business. I share my expertise as a people-centric leader in work culture and human resources. My guests share their expertise in human resources, marketing, sales, finance, IT, leadership, and the multiple facets that you need to take care of your business. If you love to learn and want to find out how you can rev up your business, join us. Welcome to another episode of Rev Up Your Business. Today, my guest is Rhonda Suurd. She is the HR Strategic Lead at Global First Power. And we're going to talk about the employee experience. What is that? Are you having trouble recruiting and retaining staff? It's very common post-pandemic, and so many of us are experiencing that. But if you want to recruit and retain top talent, you should be creating a workplace where people feel valued and wanted. So let's get started. Let me tell you more about Rhonda. Rhonda is a HR professional, and she is an HR leader with extensive experience in startups and turnaround companies across multiple industries in the private sector, the public sector, and the not-for-profit sectors, both in Canada and the United States. She is passionate about employee experience and developing fit-for-purpose HR policies and programs to support businesses in any stage of their maturity cycle. Rhonda is currently supporting a nuclear startup and is proud to contribute to the clean energy future in Canada. Welcome, Rhonda.
Well, thanks for the lovely introduction. As you've already summarized, I have spent the bulk of my career working in businesses at an inflection point. So lots of startups, but also lots of companies in turnaround, either on the verge of bankruptcy, just coming out of bankruptcy, or positioning themselves for sale to a competitor in their industry. And I find those experiences are the most fun. And where I like to spend my time, because a business that's at that sort of inflection point has so many opportunities and so many decisions that need to be made. There's a real energy that comes from partnering with leadership and helping figure out the path forward that's going to help you achieve your goals there.
I love how you use the word fun, because I think most business owners would say, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me, and that's why I'm calling upon you, Rhonda. But I think it speaks to us as HR professionals who have a very generalist experience, i.e. that we've done every aspect of human resources. So we get the picture and we know how to make it better. And I think when I talked to you a couple of weeks back and said, I'd love you to be on my show, because I've always thought of you as a person who really understands the total picture in human resources. And you're always thinking strategically and moving the bar forward where the future is going. And when we talked, you said, Hilda, I think I'd like to talk about the employee experience. I said, oh, that would be so great. Let's do that. Let's do a deep dive. So it's about the employee experience, thinking right from the start of, do I want to come to this company? Do I apply? Right through to, it's time for me to move on. And we want to talk about it. So for those of you who are skeptic, why should I bother? There are stats to show that. And HR McLean Company does statistics every year on what activities are people focusing on in human resources. And number one for the last umpteen years has been recruiting. That's the nature of the business. But it's interesting, in 2021, the employee's experience was ranked number 5. And then in 2022, and again this year in 2023, employee experience has jumped to number 2. And it's jumped to number 2 for a variety of reasons. But I'm going to let Rhonda share some of her passion and beliefs in the employee experience.
So Hilda, I'm going to tell you a terrible joke that I read as a teenager in an old copy of Reader's Digest But it stayed with me for many, many years because I'm obviously not a teenager anymore. And I think it encapsulates for me why employee experience matters so much and gives you a flavor of what is employee experience. So an executive dies and he ends up at the pearly gates, and St. Peter says to him, we don't know what to do with you. We can't tell if we should send you to heaven. We can't tell if we should send you to hell. So we're going to try something different. We're going to let you spend one day in each place, and then you're going to come back and tell me where you want to spend eternity. So the executive says, okay, you know what? Let's get it out of the way. I'm going to go to hell first. So boom, the devil shows up, whisks him down to hell. He gets there. It's nothing like he expected. Green golf course, all of his executive friends talking and laughing, having a great day together, eating great food, giggling, laughing, telling stories into the night. Just a fabulous day. Day ends. The next day, he wakes up, he's off to heaven, where he's shown to his very own cloud. He's given a harp. Angels instruct him on how to play the harp gently. It's very hushed. There's meditation time, very serene. He gets to the end of the day. He's back in front of St. Peter, and St. Peter says, well, you've tried them both. What do you think? And the executive says, I can't believe I'm saying this, but heaven was really boring. I don't want to go to heaven. I choose hell. So he gets back to hell. It looks nothing like he remembered. Scorched earth, fires burning, demons with pitchforks running at him to start poking him. He turns to the devil and says, hey, what's going on here? This isn't what you showed me yesterday. And the devil says, oh, yesterday we were recruiting you. Today you're staff.
And I mean, this is so true for some people who experience it. And I can remember when we were the engineering company that my husband and I had, and when we interviewed people, we told them about the great things we did and the events that we had for our staff and how we were there to help them develop their careers and support them. And they came, right? And a couple of months later, they said, like so many companies say what you said. And I said, well, what we said was true. I said, yeah, and it came true. But a lot of those other companies, that's not what it is. And I never realized that people would not share what exactly was happening. So when you said that joke, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, they're gonna wake up the day they go down there and realize that's not the way it was. So yeah, it's so important. It's so important to show people what they're getting into, but that it's true.
And the thing is, and if you're going to build an experience for your employees, why build it scorched earth, pitchforks, torture? Why not build it green grass, laughing, good food, and enjoying yourselves? Because you have a choice. What's the environment you're creating for your employees? I think one of the things that I really emphasize when I'm working with a startup company is, how are you being realistic about what the experience is, and have you actually thought yourself about what's realistic? And I've become skeptical, Hilda. I don't take a hiring manager's word for anything anymore. We have implemented at Global First Power and at some of the startups I was at previously, a concept I call reverse references, where when a candidate is getting to the point where we're starting to think it could be a good fit, we're getting ready to make an offer, we want to talk to their references, we give them our references. Talk to people on the team, talk to other people who report into this manager, talk to people in other departments that you're going to work closely with, talk to alumni employees who moved on to a different opportunity, and find out what is it really like to work here. Because hiring managers can say anything because they need to fill that chair, right? And even if you've got the best HR person saying, don't misrepresent, it sometimes happens. Or hiring managers can be a little bit out of touch, out of what the day-to-day work experience is for an employee on the team. So by letting candidates do reverse references, you're giving them an opportunity to get an unfiltered perspective. And one thing I'll say about this is not for you as the employer. It's not one more assessment. You're not getting a report back from the reverse references. What did you think of them? Should we hire them or not? This is 100% for the candidate to make up their mind about you as a company.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's kind of, I'm sure people are listening saying, oh, I couldn't do that. Like, let my staff say what they really think. And I think if you're thinking that right now, it means that you need to think about the employee experience and change that. If you want to recruit and retain people, you're saying to yourself, I'm not sure that I'm doing a good job. And you need to step back. And I think one of the things that I want to kind of have people reflect on is the fact that when we talk about employee experience and thinking about what can we do to help make that person want to stay, want to be part of the company, it is the same idea, the same thought process that go when you're thinking about client experience. How do you make a great client experience so you have raving customers who want to come back to you? Well, you want to do the same for your employees and think about, what do I want to do to make sure my staff want to come back every day and feel like this is so great, and we need to think that through in order to make sure that you help create that experience.
I couldn't agree more. I also want to reassure business leaders, this isn't expensive. This, you don't have to have budgets like the big, Coca-Colas of the world or Googles. You don't need to be throwing tons of money at this. My philosophy in every startup and every company that's facing bankruptcy or just coming out of it is cheap and cheerful. What can you do with minimum dollar investment, but with investment of people's time and energy, right? It's about, how do you get your whole people leadership team approaching it differently? And when you talk about the principles of customer experience, they apply here. If your employees are coming to work and they can't access files they need because their computer's too slow, so they're in data processing roles, but they spend 20 minutes out of every hour watching it buffer instead of putting invoices in, that's not a productive employee experience. That's not productive or helpful for you as a business. If the processes that they need to follow are so complex and so onerous that you've missed the point of the actual work that you're trying to accomplish, maybe you need to go back in and look at those processes with a critical eye and find out, why does something need 7 reviewers? Is that really necessary?
And that's about helping staff realize you care because you provide them with the tools for them to work efficiently. I think another thing you talked about was communication. And when we talk about the client experience, we talk about, you get repeat customers when they value what you're doing and they know, like, and trust what you're doing. You're reliable, you're communicative, you're creating a really good feeling. And I think that same thing applies for your employees. If they feel they can trust you, that you're thinking about them and you care about them, and it's reliable, the resources and support you have, this is all creating a more positive employee experience.
100%. And there's a few things that run through my mind when you're saying that, Hilda. So the first is, people do need to feel valued. Every single person listening to this podcast has to realize that people have options. If you still believe that you have an employee on your payroll who's lucky to have a job and couldn't be hired anywhere else and has 0 other options but to keep working for you in that role, I would politely say you're lying to yourself. One thing we've seen over the last few years is that people have more options than they realized before the pandemic, and they're a lot less frightened of exercising those options. So whether you truly value them or not, you need to start acting like you value them. And of course, where it's harmonious is when you really do value your team. But look, you know what? I've worked with all kinds of managers over the years, and sometimes the best you can do is pretend, and I'm okay with that. But
sometimes people can see through that, when it's not genuine.
It's a tricky line, and I'm not saying like go over the top and It's better, definitely, Hilda. It's better when managers truly value their people. That is the goal. I think your Rev Up program really speaks to this. And how do you help change people leaders' mindset in how they work with their team?
So you mentioned Rev Up, and so for those that haven't heard it before or who want a refresher, Rev Up is a concept that my husband and I did to create a best workplaces in Canada, but we didn't call it Rev Up. We were busy helping our staff really feel like, wow, this is a great place to work. Wow, I'm growing in ways that I feel satisfied with. So when we were busy building the business, that's what we did. But afterwards, when we sold the business, and I decided of all the things that I did, it was human resources that I loved. So when I started in my own business, I thought, how do I articulate helping people create a healthy work culture? And how do I help managers be better people-centric managers, people leaders? And I came up with the concept of Rev Up, which, Rhonda, thank you for sharing that. And it stands for 5 values that when you adopt them as a person, as a leader, as a parent, you really can make a difference in your communication with each other. And Rev Up is 5 words: respect, equality, valued. And then the last 2, I think, were the differentiators for our company: uniqueness and potential. And when you tap into the uniqueness of individuals, yourself and others, and use that potential, it gives people more engagement, more productivity, more sense of belonging to an organization.
And that's so critical, because the idea behind a positive employee experience is you're going to cut your turnover, you're going to increase your productivity, and you're going to be more effective as a business if you need to pivot, change directions due to market conditions or change in leadership or manufacturing innovations, whatever it is. Every business faces change. So building that workforce that's ready for that and is willing to be part of those changes. It's not going to happen if they've had negative employee experiences. If they come into work feeling like they're frustrated, they're not heard, they don't trust the leadership, these are all detrimental factors. And
these all slow down the business and the success of the business, the productivity, the lack of communication, which can lead to errors in project implementation. So there's a cost factor associated with it on a day-to-day business, and then there's a cost factor when people leave. And you and I talk about the statistics, and I'm going to let you share what the statistics are when you treat people like a commodity and they leave. One person leaving
costs your business 2.5 times their annual salary. And just think about that for a second, 2.5 times. So that's staggering to me. But what that represents is lost productivity while the role's unfilled, time and effort to recruit, the cost of recruiting, the time and effort to sit through interviews, reference checks, whatever your process looks like, and then the time that you spend onboarding them before they're fully productive, because it's a very rare employee that you can hire, spend 1 day with, and on day 2, they're fully productive in their role. That's just not the reality. So turnover is not your friend. Turnover is something that businesses really are trying to guard against in this labor market, where people are carefully evaluating where they want to be and where they see their future. And I go back to something you said earlier, Hilda, about respect. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, because I truly believe that if you want to show that you respect your employees and you want to build trust with your employees, you have to be good at administration. And trust me, I don't love administration. Administration is boring. Like, you're never going to hire me to process your payroll because I will make mistakes on it. But what you do need to do is hire someone who's passionate about payroll, who's going to do it right. You need someone who is going to be on top of expense report processing, or vacation tracking. Because if employees feel that every time they get paid, they have to scrutinize their deposit to find the errors and then report them and get them corrected, you're eroding trust every time. If they feel like every time they ask their manager, can I take a 3-day long weekend? And the manager's like, I don't know how much time you have already taken this year. I'm not sure if I can approve this. You're eroding trust. So taking care of those administrative things, getting them enrolled in the benefits, the pension, the group RSP, whatever it is, that really matters. That is where you start to show, I respect you. I understand that I have an obligation to you to make sure that you are paid correctly, that your experience as an employee in this arena is positive. And it opens the door for higher level trust exercises. Yeah. So you can have all the fantastically scripted town halls you want, but if you're not getting basic employee experience factors right, they're not listening to you. They don't believe what you're telling them because their experience with your company is that you're sloppy on the details and you don't know what you're doing. So your great vision, your strategic plan, whatever it is you're trying to energize them around, you're not going to get them on board if you aren't taking care of their basic employment needs.
And I was just thinking about your example, and another example I want to share is the cheap and cheerful version. You make that request. I want to take a 3-day weekend next week. And then you say, okay, fine, I'll look into it. You never get back to them. They remind you 2 or 3 times and you still don't get back to them. What does that do for me? I mean, it doesn't cost you more than 5 minutes to go check and then send me an email. And it took 3 weeks for you to approve it. I certainly don't feel like you care about me, that you don't value me. So these are little things that just erode. And if we think about the fact that, if you treat people like commodities and you don't think they're going to leave, remember, we've gone through 3 years of COVID. And during those 3 years, number one, we learned that we were more resilient than we ever thought, that we can adapt, we can manage a lot of stress, and we can try new things and not be scared. So if you think that person's not ready to leave, you really need to think about the journey that all of us had for 3 years. And you'll realize that people will leave. And during that COVID time, they were discovering their passions and now want to pursue their passions, whether it's in after hours or as part of a new career, a new job opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. The other thing I think that the pandemic was really good for was getting people to spend time in reflection. So not just about hobbies and passions, but also what's important to me. What do I value? How do I want to live my life? And when candidates talk about company values, they really mean it today. In the past, they may not have even looked at that on your website. Now, I have candidates coming into phone screens, into interviews saying, I really loved your value of community at Global First Power, or your value of safety really resonates with me. So whatever it is that your values are, I would say your employee experience has to live up to those values because they're looking for signs of congruence or incongruence. And when they're finding incongruence, it's just one more tick on the column of, am I sure I want to be working here?
Yeah. And what I find is that checkbox, people know within the first 2 weeks whether they're going to stay. Because going back to the pearly gates, if you sold them that this was going to be golf courses and luxurious meals, and they arrive and nobody greets them, nobody takes them out for lunch, you're plopped on the desk, you fill out your forms, and now you are onboarded. Well, they don't feel engaged. They don't feel connected to anybody, and they're starting to think, this isn't what I signed up for, and they're going to leave. So you really do have to make them feel, that you're ready for them, that you care, and that you want to bring them up to speed, not in 3 months of figuring it out yourself, but in a month of learning the way you want things done.
think it's so much about the onboarding experience, and then what's the work that you're assigning them? Is it what they thought they were going to be working on?
Exactly.
So there's two things that come to mind, and one is I love boomerang employees. They are my favorite. Nothing makes me happier than to have a good employee say, I'm going to stretch my wings, go to a company, have a horrible experience, and call me back and say, I know you said I didn't burn any bridges. Did I? Because I hate it here and I want to come back. And, you know, when they call before you filled the role, like that is fantastic news for you, because you're getting a trained employee back who has realized, hey, what I had here was actually a lot better than I gave it credit for. But the other thing is, candidates do you a favor when they turn down your job. And I'll share an example, not from my current employer, but from a previous startup. We were fully remote and we were trying to hire a new grad. And we talked about what fully remote was going to look like. And we gave him reverse references. He spoke to people and what was their experience working remotely, what did onboarding look like, all of that. And then respectfully, he declined our offer. We thought he was fantastic, but I respect his decision so much, because he knew for himself that he needed more in-person learning. He wanted to be co-located with a manager because he was a new grad, and that was important to him. So being scrupulously honest about what that actual experience day in, day out performing the work is, and letting them hear it from other people in the team who are living the reality right now. Look, the job of a reverse reference isn't to sell a candidate on the company, it's to reveal the warts. And if the candidate says, I can live with those warts, I want to come on board, that's great. But if they hear those stories and they think this isn't for me, then your reverse references are working. They're helping candidates decide, is this the right place for me to be?
Part of an interview should be both. You're looking for that candidate, and that candidate needs to learn whether they want to work there. And so the more you give them, the better. I know in some of our previous conversations, you talked about the old guard and paying your dues. And I wonder if you want to bring that up in our conversation today.
Sure. It ties into so much of what we're experiencing. So when you come into a company, you will invariably run into the old guard. And the old guard could be people who have long tenure, could be people who have a depth of experience and a very narrow niche expertise, right? So very siloed thinkers. It could be people who entered the workforce at a time when conditions were difficult. Whatever their backstory is, you can recognize a member of the old guard when they've got this prevailing attitude of, if it worked for me, it will work for you. Or nobody did me any favors, so why should I do you any favors? Or I don't care that this process doesn't make sense. I told them that when I was hired and nobody changed it for me, so you have to follow the same process. So when you're dealing with someone who basically says, I know this isn't working, or I know this is unpleasant, or I know this, just isn't good practice anymore, but I don't care because it's what I went through, and therefore you will go through it too, and it will build your character, and it'll let you earn your stripes so that I can respect you as a colleague. That's extraordinarily detrimental to employee experience, because you're hiring people in who are coming with ideas, opinions, experiences. They may not have the same depth of experience or the same length of tenure in the industry as your old guard represents, but that doesn't mean that they know nothing, and that doesn't mean that their opinions aren't valid. So when you're thinking about employee experience, you really want to be watching for, how do we help that old guard let go of the past and realize that it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter experience for everyone, and continuous improvement is not a bad thing, whether it's in employee onboarding or work processes or the introduction of computers, like whatever it is that they're resisting, if you can help them to start letting go of that, I find it's very beneficial to employee experience.
So give us some suggestions you would do to help a business owner who finds one of their managers like that, or they suddenly realize, yeah, I'm kind of like that. So what should I do to change?
Well, I mean, obviously, Hilda, the first thing they should do is be calling you to put the team to rev up. But that aside, I think some of the things that really matter are you need to give the old guard opportunities to contribute their expertise, but also to say this part isn't going to be your sandbox, right? And the way you make it clear that this, perpetuation of bad business practice or bad employee experience isn't going to be tolerated is with your senior leadership team. When they say, no, that's not what we're doing here. No, we're not going to condone that. I think that helps a lot. Making sure that new employees have other avenues to talk to. So maybe you're doing skip level meetings where they, on quarterly, monthly, whatever frequency works for your business cycle, they're meeting with their manager's manager and talking about their experience. We at Global First Power do a new hire survey. So 1 month after candidates start, we survey them and say, okay, so how's it shaping up? Is what we sold you in the interview what you're experiencing on the job? Do you have access to the tools you need? Do you have the information you need? Are you clear on your manager's expectations? Are you running into obstacles? So we get that feedback from them at the 1 month mark. While they're still willing to share it before it's been crushed out of them, and then we act on it, right? Like taking the survey is just one piece, but acting on the results is so important. And when you get those survey results, going back to the old guard and doing it in as non-threatening a way as possible, saying, okay, we got some interesting feedback here. I think there's an opportunity, right? It's always an opportunity. It's never, you did this wrong. There's an opportunity to change how we're onboarding this new employee.
Regardless of whether it's a manager who needs to modify, improve their behavior, or a new employee, it's always how you say things and to do it in a respectful way that is looking at it as an improvement for the better, as opposed to a reprimand and thou shalt not do that. And I think the old guard example you gave was a person autocratic and kind of a boot camp mentality. It's good enough for us, it's good enough for you, and suck it up and just get moving with it. So that needs to change. I'm looking at our time and I want to make sure we cover remote work. This is a big hot topic, and it is something that one should consider as a user experience. So share with us your thoughts on that, Rhonda.
So Hilda, I'm very opinionated on this, and I've gone through it.
I've got you here.
I know. At Global First Power, we took our first office space less than a year ago, and we had to think about what will that look like. And one of the things that I brought back to the leadership team was the Gartner research with the quadrants of work, which you may be familiar with. So they described work as alone. So you're working alone remotely from anywhere on something that you can do individually without collaborating. Working together alone. So I'm still working remotely. I'm alone in my space, but I'm collaborating with someone on a project. So maybe it's by email, maybe it's by Zoom, by Teams, whatever. Working together alone. I've come into an office. You and I are sitting side by side at hoteling stations, but I've got my headphones on and I'm still working alone. I'm not talking to you. I'm doing my own work independently. I just happen to be in the same space as you, or working together. And what the GFP leadership team really latched onto is together is the magic sweet spot for us. So together work is I'm working with my colleagues, we're collaborating, we're actively building something, we're creating something together, and we're doing it together in the same space. So when you think about remote work, I think it's quite clear that for knowledge workers, it is always going to be a factor. We are never going to get back to the pre-pandemic situation where all knowledge workers reported to an office for a standard 9 to 5 day with a commute. Yes, I know that in industries like manufacturing, retail, different service industries, a physical presence is still very much a requirement of the job. But for knowledge workers, I think we have seen it shift into this hybrid world, and how do leaders make sense of how much hybrid, right? What's the split? What makes sense for my team, for my business? So the piece I keep harping on incessantly is, tell me what your together work is. If you as a team leader can't tell me what work your team needs to do together, then I'm going to be arguing that your team doesn't need to come into the office if you can't articulate that. And don't be afraid to also factor in what's preference here. We've got extroverts at GFP. We've got some of our people leaders, including our CFO, are hugely extroverted. So they thrive on the hum of background noise and conversation, and that energizes them in a way that for some of our introverted team members, being in the office just, drains them and wipes them out. So how do you look at the together work as well as what's actually going to bring energy to the people on your team?
And I think that balance of the quadrants, but also the preference is really, really important. And it's interesting, early on in studies, they found that even introverts wanted to come back to work some of the time, and on their terms, not socializing right at the coffee, like at coffee chatting, but to hear that there are other people out there, but that they're comfortable in their own space. So I found that illuminating, is that even the introverts like to come, but on that more less intimate term that the extroverts want and stuff. We could talk all day, but I want to make sure that we covered that remote and really focused on employee experience. And I'm sure people got tips and strategies on how to now rethink creating a place where people will want to join your company and stay at your company. And I really appreciate what you've shared with us today, Rhonda.
Oh, this has been so much fun, Hilda. Thanks for inviting me.
How do we get a hold of you, Rhonda?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Rhonda Suurd on LinkedIn. So look me up and send me a message. I'm always happy to connect and chat on this topic with anyone who's interested.
Well, thanks for coming. And to those listeners and viewers, give it a thumbs up. I'm sure you've learned a lot today. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe, because there'll be other interesting guests who really will bring to you a better opportunity to rev up your business through some of the tips and strategies and trends in their areas where it will help your business. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rhonda. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. For more HR tips, strategies, and to learn how you can create a people-centric workplace, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.